What if the most dangerous moment in your life? Was it the moment you decided to leave? What if walking away from a marriage? Was a death sentence already signed? Today's case is not just about murder. It is about control, obsession, and what happens when power begins to slip? Because behind closed doors, in the quiet dark of an English home, a decision was made, and by morning, everything was over. Before we begin, this is a story that deserves to be heard. So if you believe victims deserve a voice, take a moment to subscribe, like the video, and share this case. Because the more people who hear it, the less likely it is to happen again. It started in 1999, a time when the internet was still new, unregulated, unpredictable, and for some, dangerous. That's where they met. Two strangers, separated by an ocean. One in Louisiana, the other in England. What began as a conversation became a connection, and that connection became controlled. He was wealthy, established, a man used to getting what he wanted. She was independent, grounded, a woman with her own life, her own identity. But distance can disguise the truth, because online, you only see what someone chooses to show you. And sometimes, control doesn't look like control until it's too late. Eventually, he moved from Louisiana to England, a complete shift, new country, new environment, but more importantly, a power shift, because now he was in her world. But instead of adapting, he imposed it, slowly, quietly. Control began to take shape. Control doesn't begin with violence, it begins with influence. What you wear, who do you speak to, where do you go? Then it tightens, isolation, pressure, fear, and by the time you recognize it, you're already trapped inside it. Inside that home, there were children, sleeping under the same roof, unaware of the tension, unaware of the danger, unaware that everything was about to change. And that detail matters, because what happened next did not happen in isolation. It happened in a house full of life. Then came the moment. She asked for a divorce, a simple sentence, a normal decision. But to a controlling mind, it is not rejection, it is rebellion. And rebellion must be punished. Because what happens when a person who thrives on control loses it? What happens when the one thing they believe they own walks away? Do they let go? Or do they take everything with them? It happened at night. Darkness outside. A silence inside. The kind of silence that feels wrong, because nothing about that night was normal. The first weapon, it was not a knife. It was a granite rolling pin. Heavy, solid, blunt force. A tool meant for something ordinary, turned into something violent. The attack began there. Suddenly, brutal, unforgiving, and in that moment, everything changed, because violence had crossed a line, and once that line is crossed, there is no going back. But it didn't end there. It moved outside, into the dark. And that's where the second stage began. A knife, not once, not twice, 23 times, 23 acts of rage, 23 decisions. Because this was no longer an impulse. This was an escalation. Each wound tells a story, not of fear, but of fury, not of panic, but of control slipping and snapping, and all of it in the dark. Cases like this are not just stories, they are warnings, because what comes next, it is just as important as what happened that night. Inside the house, the children were still there, sleeping, unaware that outside, their world had just been shattered. That detail never leaves this case, because violence doesn't end with the victim, it echoes. When authorities arrived, the scene felt wrong, not chaotic, not random, wrong, because of the violence didn't stay in one place. It moved inside the house. There were signs of a struggle, disruption, tension, the beginning of something. But outside, in the dark, that's where it became something else. something final. The first weapon was already there. A granite rolling pin. Ordinary, familiar, until it wasn't. Oh, until it became part of the story. But the violence didn't end with it. At some point, the weapon changed. And when a weapon changes, so does intent. Because this wasn't one strike, or two. There were 23 wounds. 23. That's not panic. That's a continuation. That's a decision, made again and again. So investigators had to ask, if this were self-defense, why didn't it stop? Because the evidence revealed something deeper. This didn't happen in one place. It followed her, from inside to outside, into the dark and inside the house. The children were still there, sleeping, unaware that this wasn't over in seconds. It lasted. 2 locations, 2 weapons, a sequence. Not confusion, not an accident, but a series of choices, made more than once. In court, the story was no longer emotional. It was evidence. The prosecution laid it out clearly. Control, conflict, and a final act of escalating violence. 2 locations, 2 weapons, 23 wounds. Not a moment, a sequence. The defense tried to reframe it. A loss of control, a situation that spiraled too far. But in a courtroom, words are tested against facts, and the jury was watching closely. They listened, not just to what was said, but to what couldn't be explained. Why did the violence continue? Why did it move into the dark? Why did it take 23 wounds to end? Because those questions don't disappear. They sit with a jury. And when the time came, it wasn't emotion that decided the outcome. It was the pattern, the sequence, the escalation. Because some facts do not bend, and 23 wounds do not lie. The verdict came.
The court
Guilty.
finds the defendant
The
guilty
court found him
on all
responsible,
charges.
not for a moment of panic, but for a sustained act of violence. He was sentenced to life in prison, a punishment measured in years, for a crime measured in seconds. And for a moment, there was silence, because this was justice in the eyes of the law. But justice doesn't reverse what was done. It doesn't bring back what was lost. It simply draws a line between what happened and what must never happen again. This case was never just about a murder. It was about control, about what happens when someone believes they have the right to decide another person's fate. And what happens when that belief is challenged. A woman made a choice to leave, to reclaim her life, and for that, she paid the ultimate price. If this story stayed with you, make sure it reaches someone else. Share it. Talk about it. Keep it alive. Because silence, this is where cases like this begin, and awareness is where they end. No justice, no closure, no answers. Every case leaves a shadow. Every mystery deserves a voice. This is Shadow Case Files,